numb and my heart's feeling heavy. Got anxiety in my blood, but I'm about to get ready to talk about it. And ashamed of the way that my mind works, straight flexing like a knee jerk. Got a lot of things on my mind, got a lot of things to pursue. Ain't no stigma gonna stop me from reaching my potential. What a nice view.
All right, so we have Katie here. Katie, actually, I don't even know your last name.
My last name's Heiss.
Heiss, okay, fellow East Coaster. We're talking right now in the meditation room of our med school, / my on-campus studio that I've now claimed it as. So yeah, thank you for showing me this room. I didn't even know this was here. Yeah. So listeners, if you hear a random door close, it's because like the front door, or I guess back door of our lecture hall is close. So you might be able to hear that, but I'll try to cut that out. Well, Katie, thank you so much for coming on my show. This is really cool. You said you've listened to a whole bunch of episodes, and I don't really know you very well, but I'm really excited to kind of get to know you better today and just allow you to really share your experiences and challenges with mental health. Today we're going to kind of, it seems like we're mostly going to be talking about your experience at medical school, but a little bit before then as well. So, you're a fellow East Coaster, so where did you grow up?
I grew up primarily in Ogdensburg, New York.
Okay.
My visualization is New York looks like a profile of a dog's head, and I'm the forehead.
Okay.
So I'm as far away from New York City as you can get in the state.
Okay.
Yeah.
And how far? And so still very far away from like Buffalo, because Buffalo's on the west side, right?
Buffalo's like 4 hours away, I think.
Okay.
So from where I'm at, if you go 2 hours south, it's Syracuse, and then 2 hours west, it's Buffalo.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. And then you eventually made it over to like New Mexico, right?
Yep.
And you're not a typical medical student, which I like and I can relate to. I was an economics guy, and you seems like very even opposite of that. You were an art major, right? Mm-hmm. So when you were studying art, did you ever envision that you were going to end up here in medical school, or like what was that like?
I had an inclination that I wanted to do medical school. When I started college, I still went to college in New York, but I applied with the ideas of being a math major, an art major, and pre-med.
Wow, trifecta.
That was my plan. I started college with that direction. And as of sophomore year, I couldn't handle doing that. I was also on the crew team, so trying to do a sport with rowing while also doing all three of those directions, there's not enough time in the day.
Certainly.
So I decided that I was going to go the art route, because the school I went to, the art professors were all they were wonderful, and I enjoyed all the different processes that we were learning.
And math professors aren't that fun.
It was okay.
For the most part.
It was okay.
I've had some very boring math teachers and, very awesome art teachers, considering one of the art teachers I had growing up was my mother.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah, ages, I think it was grades 5th through grades 8th. I was actually being taught art by my mom. So that was kind of interesting. I'd always be like, "Hey, Miss Clement, Mom." It was interesting and challenging. So when you graduated college, though, did you start working in the art industry, or what did that look like?
I did not. I did think of getting my MFA, but throughout college, I was working in New Mexico. That's where New Mexico comes in. Okay. There's a Boy Scout camp out there called Philmont. It's Philmont Scout Ranch. About 22 to 23,000 scouts go out there to camp every summer. And the position that I had was I was in the ranger department. So for every crew that comes out, it's 10 to 12 people per crew. There needs to be one ranger that meets that crew and teaches them the skills that they need to be successful in the Philmont backcountry.
Oh, okay.
So you're teaching them how to do bear bags and where to set up tents and how to do trail camps and staff camps. And then you're doing first aid training, and if we have an emergency, the ranger department is often the people on the ground carrying the litter if a litter needs to be carried, or we're also, if there's a search, we're the people with boots on the ground searching. Okay. So that's the ranger department as a whole, and I worked there every summer through college. Okay.
Cool summer gig.
Yeah. So when I graduated from college, I just did what I was usually doing at the end of the summer and going out to Philmont, still trying to figure out what I wanted to do, and that camp has the opportunity that you can work there during the autumn or the winter. So I worked 2 full years doing Philmont there after graduating, and then my last winter that I was out in New Mexico, I worked as a ski instructor.
Rad.
And go ahead.
So, we kind of talked about it before we hopped on, the recording here. It seems like most of your mental health challenges, at least maybe the most significant ones, were here in medical school, but you had some mental health challenges prior, and it was like sort of around this period. So can you kind of tell us about what that was like?
Yeah, the first time that I really needed to reassess like how I was thinking about things was after I was a ski instructor. Because while I was there, I had decided I don't know if you know about passion planners.
No, I don't know what that is.
So a passion planner, it's a planner.
But without a calendar.
The calendar's in there. So what you do is at the beginning of the passion planner, it gives you a life map of like where do you want to be. And it'll tell you like in 3 months where do you want to be, in a year, and then in I think it's 3 years, and lifetime, like your life goals, where do you want to be.
Interesting.
And I found the planner and filled out, like I did the whole life map thing, and still realized I still wanted to be a physician. So after I worked one more summer at Philmont after being a ski instructor, and then after that is when I went back to New York to take classes for pre-med. I did kind of like a pre-med post-bac self-led type
At
thing.
a community college?
At a SUNY school.
Oh, okay. Why I ask is because I did mine at a community college.
Yeah.
But, well, cool. Okay.
So with going back to New York is when I first, it was...
Experienced some challenges.
It was a huge transition from being, like, by myself in the outdoors all the time, and, like, around certain people out there, and then transition to being back at home. So I was living with my parents. I was now doing a long distance relationship, and then I was commuting 45 minutes to get to where I was going to school. And then the class structure of the science courses is like, it's very different from when you're doing an art course. So I think just having it, like, it almost felt like my life kind of flipped over, and it took me a bit to figure out, like, emotionally what I needed to make sure that I was okay.
And at that point, though, were you seeking any professional means of mental health care, or were you just kind of soul searching, as cliche as that I guess sounds, like on your own?
I did try talking to one person, but the experience was not what I was hoping for. So I did talk to one person on the phone, but what I found out, honestly, was that what I needed was exercise. I needed, like, a set schedule of exercise. And then I'm all about communication. And so there was a lot of communicating with, like, significant other and parents of, like, just how to, I don't know, get through the day or get through the week. And that ended up being pretty good for me. And I think the physical activity, like doing exercise, I made sure that every single day I worked out, because if I didn't work out, the next day was awful. So at this point in time, though, would you describe it as you were experiencing severe depression, or even is severe too strong of a word? Like, what was that like? I don't think it was depression. I haven't necessarily put a label on what I was feeling. I just knew that I was not even keeled. Not normal Katie. Like, it was almost like if you're in a canoe and you're starting to feel the water come over the edges, like as it's sinking, it kind of felt like that. But knowing that, like, if I exercised, I was getting, like, 1 cup out of the water, or 1 cup out of the canoe, and it was okay. So you at least learned, like, exercise is one of your most effective coping mechanisms for once shit starts to just get challenging. So now I guess let's kind of skip over to chapter 2 here, or almost, medical school. So, you get into medical school,
And medical school, the beginning, I think, is like some of the most exciting and challenging, and it's just like this whirlwind of emotions. That's at least how I would describe my experience. Because I was so happy and proud to be here, and then I'd be also freaking out that I'd be failing classes, and I was struggling academically and trying to, still have a successful relationship with my wife at the time. Well, I'm still with the wife, of course, but it was just very, very, everything was challenging in a sense. So what was your experience like?
My experience was that the first, really up until Sci-Pharm was over, was probably one of the most stressful, awful times of my life.
Mm-hmm.
And I like to use humor to like make myself feel better, but aside like that time of like all the courses that we had to do, there was nothing that I couldn't just laugh away how I was feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And like obviously I was like I'm super excited to be here, and I think that I'm really happy to be at PNWU because like the support system that you have between like the friends that you have and the professors and then the other outside resources that they provide, it's noticeable that they're trying to take care of you.
Mm-hmm.
But one thing I found is it's hard to lean on other friends when they're crumbling as well.
Yeah.
And then you're asking for you're talking to professors, but there's only so much that they can do because the work that you need to do is your own.
Yeah.
You can share it, but again, the other folks Sci-Pharm is just like crazy.
Yeah, and well, for the listeners, Sci-Pharm is I've talked about it on the show a few times, but if you don't know, Sci-Pharm is it's kind of like a biochemistry course, I guess, in a sense. It's Foundations of Science of Medicine, I guess is the acronym, right? I don't know.
Yeah, Scientific Foundations of Medicine.
Whatever. Either way, it is hell. It is not fun. It's not enjoyable. Some people liked it, but I think especially students like me and you, who are non-traditional students,
mm-hmm.
seem to struggle the most. And that was at least what my class was like, because you're a year younger than me. I guess I don't know if I explained that at the beginning of this podcast. And one thing I also found, and that you kind of talked about earlier, it's like, when you had that mental health challenge prior to medical school, you could rely on your family and, your boyfriend at the time or whoever you were seeing. And, in medical school, at least my experience here living in Yakima, I have some very great friends and social support. And I, of course, have my wife that lives with me. Outside of that, though, I don't really know anyone in Yakima, to be honest. Maybe some spouses of my classmates who I go with. But, it's like you said, you look for social support here in Yakima when you're dealing with some kind of struggle. And every other person you're trying to rely on is also a medical student who's also in mode, kind of freaking out. So so you were experiencing, was it anxiety that you were gonna not be able to handle, fail out of school? Were you not sleeping? Were you depressed at this time? Can you describe what you were feeling?
So I talked about before with the canoe that's sinking. I think now it was like a canoe that's sinking with lightning and the water's dumping you over.
Okay.
I found that I tend to be pretty clear-headed,
mm-hmm.
And what I found is I had a bunch of stuff going on where I couldn't think. It felt kind of like a tornado was going on in my brain at all times. And when we're in class and you're trying to pick out stuff from quizzes or
what's
participate
important
in CILs,
mm-hmm.
Things that are important, I couldn't figure out anything. It was just going through all the information and nothing stuck.
Mm-hmm.
And then what I think the main point when I found out that I needed to do more than just go with the flow was one of the people in your class. He asked me, "How are you doing?" It was during they had a group study panel,
mm-hmm.
and so I went to go listen to other people that are doing group studying, because traditionally I'm someone who studies by myself.
Mm-hmm.
There's a way I like going through information. I did it by myself, and there's so much information I can't do that here. So I went to the panel, and someone heartfelt asked me, "How are you doing?" And I'm in a classroom of a bunch of people that I don't know. A lot of them are second years. He asked me how I'm doing, and all I could do was cry.
Yeah.
And I tend to be upbeat, bubbly, no problems, and the fact that I couldn't say anything but tears was like, oh no, this is not going well.
Well, and it's actually very typical. You know, like I'm sure at the time you might maybe felt embarrassed or like, ugh. But it's, you know, there's people that I saw that happened to in my class, and it seems it's like a normal medical school experience. Now, at this time, you know, clearly you're struggling mentally. Were you also struggling academically? Like, were you on the verge of failing, or were you doing maybe just not as well as you wanted to, kind of thing?
Sci-Pharm, I've failed the first 3 exams.
Okay.
So academically, I was not doing as well as I would have liked.
Yeah, no, I feel you. I know what that feels like all too much. Yeah.
So the other classes, I was still doing okay. But the issue is I put so much heart and energy in Sci-Pharm to just try and bring it up as much as I could. I wasn't able to pay attention to other courses. And so it kind of felt like this sinking ship thing going on. And of course, like when you've failed a certain number of exams by the time you're at midterms, like you get sent a letter that's saying like
you meet with your advisor.
Yeah, you're not in trouble or anything, but you also need to make sure to be paying attention. And it's such a mind switch of like, usually I'm a good student. Usually I'm like not struggling to just get over the pass line. Yeah. And so that was a huge shift for me being here of we're in a class of a bunch of other people who also are very used to being on the top of their class. And so once you have all these brilliant people together, someone's got to settle somewhere higher or lower. Yeah. And it was a complete mental shift of I just want to pass.
Yeah. And I think that's a good kind of goal. And I remember coming into medical school, everyone wants to be the best and do as well as they can. I still, of course, want to do well, but I also know I want to do well as I can. Like, I always just base it, I want to do the best that I can. And at least some of my experience was, some things I found extremely frustrating about medical school is previously, before medical school, if you weren't doing well, it seemed like you could just do the simple formula of, okay, well, more work is going to get me a higher grade kind of thing. And then, here in medical school, I remember I would continuously, at least at the beginning, try to work harder and harder and harder. And it was like I wasn't even really seeing any returns. And that was very, very frustrating. And I remember getting that same called in by my advisor, Dr. Lyons, talking about amino acids. And he was just like, listen, like, we can go over all these different techniques, but at the end of the day, like, you're just going to have to dedicate more time to this because memory is just almost a repetition game at the end of the day. And I remember being extremely frustrated because it's like, there's only 24 hours in the day. Like, I'm already not sleeping enough. I'm already not exercising. I'm already not spending time with my wife. Like, I don't have enough time. And so I remember feeling that same sort of like, well, what the hell am I supposed to do here? So what did you do, though, and how did you kind of work through that challenging time where you kind of just broke down, and, like, how did you move forward?
So during this time, for a good amount of time, I was working out. I was doing CrossFit, but then I stopped going because dedicating an hour to CrossFit early in the morning when it was starting at like 5 or 6 in the morning, and then I wasn't going to bed until like 11 or 12. Something had to give, so I gave up that. But I talked about resources that are available here. I did talk to one of the folks that's Dr. Staley. I talked to her, and I also talked to Dr. Amity, and we went over like ways to make the thunderstorm calm down, and ways when I'm feeling overwhelmed to just take a step back, do something else.
Well, okay, that all sounds dandy and stuff. Yeah. However, how did you do that? Because I think there's going to be people listening that are like, well, I'm in that thunderstorm, and you're saying like you learned techniques and all this stuff, but so what did you learn? Like, did you meditate, or how did you put kind of the craziness of medical school in perspective so it didn't feel like this overwhelming storm as you describe it?
I was recommended an app It's called Hope Box.
Hope Box. Okay. Oh man, you're just blowing up on me, Katie.
I know.
Just so popular. Open up that phone.
No, it's called Virtual Hope. I was looking up the app. It's
called
Virtual Hope Box so that folks can find it.
Virtual Hope Box.
It's Virtual Hope Box. It's made through the military. And are made for folks that can experience PTSD.
Yeah, okay.
And it kind of sounded like the things I was experiencing was kind of PTSD, and so there's one where like you see a picture of a forest and it'll tell you things to visualize. The one that works well for me is there's one where I lie on the floor and it tells you what muscles to stress and relax. So I've used it before, a similar thing before when trying to go to sleep, because when I have issues going to sleep, usually I just kind of pass out at the end of the day because I'm exhausted. But I'll do a body check of like putting everything to sleep. But I didn't think of doing that during the day. And this app, it leads you through like stress muscles in your head and your shoulders. Like you stress them as much as you can and then you relax them. And by the time you're done, you could do like 1 scan, 2 scans, but by the time you're done, my brain is clear.
Interesting. Very cool.
So it kind of puts together the exercise with meditation.
Yeah, I think that's well, I've tried body scan mindful meditation, especially like listening to a technique. And it's more being aware of like sensations like what are you feeling in your toes right now, what are you feeling in your knees right now. But I haven't done the whole contracting a muscle and relaxing, and that seems very, very interesting and almost very relevant to the fact that we're both studying to be osteopathic physicians, like using the body literally to almost stress the body and relax the body to then relax your mind. So you found great success doing this, or like was it hard at first?
It's for me it was not hard, because it's telling me exactly what to do.
Okay.
What you're talking about of like concentrate on one area. If I were to concentrate on my toes and how my toes are feeling, I think about my toe and then my brain goes off to somewhere else and then it's a fury. This is like all you're thinking about is you're trying to tend something as much as you can, because you want to be a good meditator.
Yeah. So
you're stressing something as much as you can to make sure you're doing the most you can, and then you relax it. And then it's telling you the next thing. So for me, it was very easy to follow. Okay.
Well, that's awesome. I think that's a really good takeaway suggestion. I want to even try this new technique because, I preach a lot about meditation on this show. I practice meditation, but I don't do it as much as I need to. And I don't carve away time, but this is something I definitely want to try. So, but I can't imagine this is the only thing you did. So what else did you kind of do?
Before, all I was doing was studying every day.
All day, every day?
All day, every day. We even have, we have the ability to listen to lectures outside of class through Panopto. I was listening to lectures, when I was driving. So it was like constant study from wake up to going to sleep. So when I was doing the pre-med post-bac thing, what I found helpful with the 45-minute drive that I did, I listened to podcasts on the way there and on the way back. So that was helpful because there were podcasts about how to do the MCAT, how to prep for your medical school interview.
Did you listen to Dr. Gray's pre-med years? I was on that one.
I did.
Yeah.
That's really cool. I didn't know that you were on there.
I
listened to it.
Well, I listened to that same podcast too because I had to commute a little bit when I was doing my post-bac stuff. And I think you should contact him as well too, because I always dreamed my favorite episodes of that podcast would be success stories of people getting in. I was like, man, I really want to be a success story and call in and give and help out the next generation of kind of pre-med students. And so I think you should do the same.
I might do that.
Hit up Dr. Gray. Yeah, for sure. Okay, sorry, I digress. Keep going.
It's all good. So I listened to that podcast, and there's another podcast called Sawbones.
Okay, yeah.
So there are a whole bunch of podcasts that I used as motivators to keep me in the direction that I wanted to go. So with how much I was studying, I did the step back of okay, what I need as a person is I need to be studying as much as I need to, with also I need to have a decent diet, I need to exercise, and then need to do something with my brain that is not all left brain. With being an art major, I am super right brain. One of the lectures I thought was really funny when someone was like, you need to stimulate the right side of your brain. And I'm like, that's not my problem. I need to stimulate the left side.
Well, just wait till you get to neuro, then you'll actually really understand it, and it's fun.
So with the podcast, what I did is I did another search of podcasts that would be helpful for me. You had posted at the beginning of our semester, last semester, about your podcast, and I had listened to it right after. But then after I went through like Fury Brain, remembered that you had the podcast, so I just like binge listened for a while. And then I revisited other podcasts that I was listening to just to have a mental break from studying. At least, like, I drive 8 minutes to campus, so I at least had that time that was not medical school. But what I found was helpful with what the podcast was that you had was it was other folks talking about their experiences while being here. With all of us as first years, like, I keep saying crumbling with SciFomm because everyone is like more on the stone faced, just got to get through this. But not necessarily talking about how they're feeling.
Well, and just acting like I have my shit all together.
Right. Like, this is fine. Like, everything's fine. And I'm that meme of like, this is not fine. What about this is fine? So the podcast was really helpful of hearing like second years, third years, all about how they were feeling similar things that I was. They were experiencing their class in a similar way of people being very stoic, and that was helpful. And just being like, okay, it's not just me. People aren't telling me that it's not just me, but it's not just me.
Okay. Well, I mean, it's I think this probably has to be one of the more satisfying moments of doing this podcast. Because, you know, I've been able to see the listeners have grown up over time. I've had certain people reach out to me, but some people that I don't know. But to hear, especially at my own school, someone who found benefit of the podcast, who eventually wanted to come on the podcast, it's just, I can't even tell you how satisfying and proud I am of you. And that's it really makes me feel good that you found help. So thank you. And so, but even that, you know, you did the app, you did the podcast. Like, what else in your life kind of did you continue to work on to start improving your mental health? And like, how would you sort of describe how you're handling this semester of medical school? And like, how does it feel different?
This semester, I feel like I at least know that I can do this. Like at the end of SciFomm, because everything was just point-wise was just like squeaking by for that class. And once that was done, I was like, if I can do that, I feel like I can figure out how to do the rest of this. So my first like actual breath of fresh air was when SciFomm was done. After that was done and going into, we had musculoskeletal, I found a really great study group to work with, and they kept me accountable. Like, we all keep each other accountable of what work needs to be done. And by the end of that semester, it was still playing catch up, but at least it set up a good foundation for this semester of how to attack all the information that we're doing. So I'm responsible for covering all the lectures, but there are a certain number that I'm responsible to like do a write-up for as a reference sheet for other folks. And then they're doing a reference sheet for ones that they're quote unquote assigned. So it makes the massive amounts of material seem more approachable. So the switches, I guess, in total what I did is meditation through the app, podcast to keep my right brain happy. And then this semester I'm starting to bring exercise back into my life. I just kind of dropped it last semester. So
well, I actually did the same my first experience with medical school. I always knew exercise was a big thing for me. It's how I burn off my crazy manic energy. And similar thing. I was big into basketball and weightlifting, but I was spending too much time at the gym and I was struggling very much academically, so I completely stopped exercising. Sleep went to shit. I gained like 25 pounds. And then so finally spring semester I learned like how to just work out a little bit more efficiently. And you know, a lot of people don't endorse this idea, but sometimes I do like working out and trying to study simultaneously. Like I'm big into videos, so I'll go on the elliptical or something and watch a video. So then I kind of at least feel I'm knocking out two birds with one stone. So now, what have you done to kind of incorporate exercise back in? Are you starting to go to CrossFit again, or are you finding somewhere in between?
I've set up a schedule for myself so far.
Okay.
It is only the first week of classes, so I use this week as a figuring out what my schedule would be. So next week is going to be where I start on Monday to make sure that working out is in there. Because right now, emotionally, like I'm still pretty good. We just came off of break. I still feel pretty good. But I have it as like at least 3 times a week I'm going to be running. And then 2 days a week it's going to be like sit-ups, push-ups, lunges.
Yeah.
And I think that's attainable because in my mind, whenever thinking about working out in the past, because with doing crew, if you're doing a workout, you're there at least for an hour, and then there's time on both sides where either you're getting ready or you're done. And so in my mind, it's almost like, oh, if I'm working out, it's like an 1.5 to 2 hour commitment.
Yeah.
And in medical school, you can't just give up 2 hours of your day to working out every single day. And this semester, I'm doing the mental switch of like half an hour is okay, just making sure that throughout the week, it's 150 minutes.
Yeah.
Because I listened to a lecture that happened last semester about like the amount of exercise you appropriately need as a healthy individual, which was 150. So I'm going to block it out as 150.
Well, whenever I talk to any first years, really, what I say is, I think first semester was the hardest semester I've ever done. However, I think what you're about to start is significantly harder. I think anatomy is getting harder. The head and neck is very challenging. Cardio and respiratory is much more challenging than MSK was. However, you are a much better medical student than you were at the beginning of August, 2018. And like you'll be able to handle the much more challenging load. I found my spring semester was much, much more enjoyable than that first semester. And I hope you kind of feel the same. So what do you plan on doing though if, and I think it's actually smart to almost expect this, like if you start struggling academically again, if you start struggling mentally again, like what tools did you find to be most helpful? Like, are you going to go seek out a therapist, or like have you developed like a group of classmates and friends that you feel more open to discussing these kind of things with?
What's really nice for this semester is that my boyfriend actually moved here. He was living in Minnesota, and now he's in Washington.
Okay, nice. So
what I think maybe what's been really helpful this week is I have someone to go home to.
And
talk about what we did this day, like today, and instead of like going down the toilet bowl of all the things that were awful in the day, it can talk about like the things that I learned, or even talk about that stuff.
Yeah, interesting.
And so now I have someone to lean on at home.
A little bit of sexual healing, as we say. That's fantastic. Well, one piece of advice then I do have, me and my friends talk about this a lot because a lot of our classmates, I feel like, are in very committed relationships. And sometimes, of course, I have classmates of mine who were like you, and they were in long-distance relationships. And then they look at me, and I have my wife who lives here. And sometimes we both sort of envy each other kind of thing. Because I look at the people who are in long-distance relationship, and it's like, well, you can study as much as you want. I understand you don't get to see your loved one as much, but you can study as much as you want, and you don't have that person you feel like you're neglecting at home. And then in my situation, like I always felt bad. I'd always make jokes like I feel like I'm just a crappy husband all the time because I'm always constantly neglecting my wife to study for medical school. And that's at least how it was at the beginning of medical school because I was struggling so much academically. I had to spend so much time into studying. So what I found and what worked really well, and it seems like this could work well for you, your goal is 150 minutes of studying per week. So I would do that same... Sorry, whatever I said. Yeah. It's a Friday, okay, whatever. But, maybe make that same goal. Like, I want 180 minutes out of every single week, 3 hours, I want to dedicate as, like love time, essentially, like dating time. Like, we're not allowed to talk about medical school. We're not allowed to do anything. Like, I just want to spend quality time with you. And that's what I found, like, budgeting that in, because there's going to be weekends where you just want to spend the whole weekend with your significant other, and just whatever. But that's, you can put yourself in a bad situation academically. But then I also think doing what I did, at least at the beginning of medical school, is very unhealthy too, where you're totally minimizing your partner. And it's like, oh yeah, like, and you just like complain to them only about medical school kind of things. So that worked extremely well for me. So that's what I would almost like, the same way you're trying to budget your time, exercise-wise, budget your relationship time the same way.
But I think I will be doing that.
Well, that's excellent that your boyfriend was in town. I'm surprised that didn't come up earlier in this conversation, because I think that is another just very, very significant challenge, kind of, dealing with medical school, juggling all these crazy things, and relationships is another big, big aspect of it. Well, I think, Katie, that's we're at 35 minutes. I think because we didn't get to relationships to the end of this conversation, I think I'm going to just have to have you come back on the podcast. And we're going to, maybe around like Valentine's Day or something, we'll have to do like a conversation. Maybe we can do like a round table of like dealing with relationships while you're in medical school. Because I think it's a very challenge in itself of just trying to juggle like a long distance relationship, trying to juggle an in-person relationship, and the different things that come with that. So let's now imagine that someone's sitting in this room who is, today's a Friday. Did you see those interview kids walking around?
I did.
Yeah, I know. And isn't that like, I was like, oh my God, I'm so happy I'm not.
They look so nice.
And you look happy to be here, like, if you only knew. But, so imagine one of those, interviewees, they get in, they start next year, and they're in a very similar struggle to what me and you both experienced. So what do you think, what piece of advice would you want to give that person?
My advice would be to allow yourself to be vulnerable to talk to other folks about how you're feeling, especially second years, because they're struggling, but it's a different time. So definitely talk to the second years, and then honestly listen to your podcast. I know that sounds like cheesy or something.
Oh no, don't
like,
promote it. Promote it.
I like promoting the podcast.
No, I'm just fine.
But definitely listen to the podcast, because you'll get not just the emotional, how you can do better, but what other folks have done to make themselves better as students, and that's been really helpful. And then try not to give up on exercise. Yeah,
I think that's great advice. And then what I would also kind of add in, like, I feel like a big reason why there's such burnout rates in medical students and doctors is, like, we have this idea that we're perfect and we're supposed to be perfect. Like, we're always seeing, the interviewees today, they all looked amazing in their suits and whatever. Doctors wear these perfectly white coats with no stains, no whatever. They look, totally put together. That is not the reality of their experience by any means. And we're all struggling in our own right. Like, I think sometimes students who listen to, like me and you talk, who are doing well in classes, they feel like they're not allowed to be depressed, kind of thing. Because they're like, well, I'm not failing like Logan is, kind of thing. Like, I have no right to be down on myself. But like everything is just kind of relative. If you're not doing as well as you want to be doing, you're not going to feel good about yourself. And so I at least just encourage anyone coming into medical school, just realize that nobody is perfect and everyone has their own challenges kind of going on. And kind of same thing like you said, just talk to people grades above you and just your classmates, and really trying to open up, because once I found, at least in my classmates, we started talking more. We all became closer friends, and we all were able to help each other out so much more than at the beginning when we were, like you said, stoic kind of thing. Well, Katie, great job today. This was a fantastic conversation. I really hope you go on the pre-med years with Dr. Ryan Gray, because I listened to that podcast so much, and I think your story is very unique. It's not the cookie cutter med student, so I really, really like that. And I think you just have a really powerful, awesome story to tell. And especially because now you can kind of tell the story like, I got to medical school and it wasn't, the ideal experience, but I learned some really amazing lessons because of it. And it's going to make you a better doctor at the end of the day. Well, yeah.
Well, thank you.
Yeah, this was awesome. Katie, you did